I'm new at this, remember?
Oh. Okay, now how do I turn the microphone on?
The on switch.
On the side.
There.
Now.
Now can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, Echo's going to pass out my handout partway through. Otherwise, we'll all be looking at it. I have titled my presentation, How French Are We? And the first thing I want to ask is, who in the audience has Ferret or Ferry as your last name? Okay. And how many people have Lefevre or Lefevre as your last name? 2. No, 3.
3.
Gary.
There were more here earlier.
Yeah. Anyway, so as you can see from the group we have, there's not that many with French surnames. And I think Carolyn touched on that earlier. But I don't know, how many of you were here in 2012? A lot. Do you remember the little booklet that's back there in the store that says, "Who is my father?"
Oh, I love that.
It's about my grandfather, that he didn't know his father. He never knew his father. And so I sort of took off from there because I really concentrated on his father on back. And I was in for a lot of surprises. I remember when I was a little child in Delaware. By the way, my mom's from Pennsylvania, my father's from Delaware. And we had a lot of connections with the Newcastle Church, Emmanuel Church on the Green. Anyway, I remember when I was a child in Delaware that people would ask me what my last name was, and I would say Lefevre. We did pronounce it that way when I was little. And they said, "Are you French?" And they said it nicely, like, "Are you French?" You know, like it was a good thing. And so I liked that attention, and I'd say yes, or a little bit, or we have that name, but not very much, you know. Anyway, it was a friendly sort of attention, but when I moved to Florida, kids would tease me about my name, and they'd say, "Karen Lefevre has a fever," and all that kind of stuff. So when I went to the university, all my professors said Lefevre. So I changed it. I changed the pronunciation, and the phone would ring, and someone would ask for Ms. Lefevre. And then my parents teased me. "Oh, Miss Lefevre." It just shows you can't win. You're going to get teased no matter what.
Exactly.
Kind of like East Texas, right? We have a lot to be proud of about our courageous pioneer ancestors. And the ones that we particularly honor at this gathering are the French Huguenots. But that first generation of pioneers here, such as Madame Marie Ferret, which is Warnbauer, Bishop Hans Herr and his wife Elisabeth Meilen-Kundig, Hans Lutzer and Anna Kammer, and Hans Jakob Bahr and Anna Barbara Hauser, were mostly Swiss Mennonites with a few German Mennonites thrown in. When the children of Madame Ferret married, as was mentioned earlier, only 2 married French people. Daniel, the eldest, married Anna Maria Leininger in Germany before they immigrated. And then Catherine, my ancestor, married Isaac Lefevre, who she had known since he was 16. And the youngest son, Philip, married Léa Dubois in New Paltz. The other 2 daughters, as was mentioned earlier, married English people. Mary Catherine married Thomas Faulkner, and Jane married Richard Davis. John Ferret married twice, first to Mary Elizabeth Musgrave and then to Ruth Buffington. Those marriages not only reduced the French gene pool, or our French DNA, but it made it easier for the next generations to marry into the larger, more diverse community. I'd like to show you how the way the marriage of 2 of our next generation's children changed things now. And it's our family, Catherine and Isaac, and how the way they married changed things. One of Catherine and Isaac's neighbors was Reverend Christian Herr, a Mennonite minister who, like his father, Bishop Hans Herr, wanted all his children to marry fellow Mennonites. And it was a brethren, the brethren. I mean, they were very, very close, and they wanted to maintain their cultural ties and their religion. it was definitely considered the right way to do things. His oldest child was his daughter Maria Katharina, his princess. You know, I mean, how do you all feel about your oldest child? I know how I feel about my oldest child and daughter. That's Echo. Mary, as she was called, was supposed to marry Martin Barr, the son of Mennonite minister Reverend John Barr, and a colleague of Reverend Christian Hare. In fact, I have a document where there was a meeting of all the Mennonite ministers in the whole area, and Christian Hare came from Conestoga, and they all signed their names and they all participated. We only have 50, so if you have a spouse or something, maybe you can share. So he was very active in his religious community, and that tie with another Mennonite minister through marriage would have been significant. It is very doubtful that Maria Katharina married Martin Barr. In fact, it doesn't seem like it happened at all. It certainly doesn't seem like she had any children with him. There's no records of it at all. And we do know that she married into our family. She married Philip Lefevre the gunsmith. Notice I'm changing it to Lefevre now because we're here. Okay. And that her father disinherited her. He left her out of his will. That was the only, I mean, it looks like that's the only extent of his unhappiness with her. Because despite her father's action, Philip and Maria Katharina were very well respected. And they worked well with the rest of the Mennonite community, with whom they were very close. They lived amongst them, and they worked amongst them. One example was Philip's collaboration with Martin Milan, a Swiss pioneer gunsmith whose 1719 workshop is considered the home of the Pennsylvania rifle. Joel Ferret became an essential part of that invention as well. It was, I mean, really, think about it. It's like you're working on an invention. It's very exciting, and everybody that has that talent comes together. But her being disinherited or disapproved of by her father really left a mark on my branch of the family. Because unlike most of you, I see very little intermingling with the local English population or even other denominations of Protestants until about 4 generations later. That's a long time. That's over 100 years where they weren't mingling with anybody with an English surname. There were no further French surnames. The only Ferrets I have are Marie, Catherine, on my direct line, Marie and Catherine. The Lefevre surname was preserved all the way down, but wait till you hear this. So look at your little chart, and you'll see where it goes is there's Maria Warrenbauer and her husband. If it's italics up here, it means they didn't come to Pennsylvania. So then under that we have Catherine and Isaac, and then you have Philip Ferret and Maria Katharina Hare. Now here's where it gets fun. They produce Adam, and then from that is the brothers, Philip Ferret, who marries Elizabeth Clack. I don't know anything about Elizabeth. But you've got Paradise Tanner Dan. So you've got right here, Esther Hare and David Wittmer are the second cousins Hare. You have over here Henry Hare and John Wittmer are first cousins. So it's really interesting because you've got the siblings and then the first cousins, second cousins, third cousins, fourth cousin, fifth cousin. This is my man that I'm talking about, John Allen Lefevre. He is the missing, my grandfather didn't know his father. That's his father. Right here you've got, these people are 5th generations in the hairline. Oh, that's funny, hairline. But
Excuse me, when you're saying hair, how do you spell that?
H-E-R-R.
That's what I thought.
It means Mr. or man.
Okay.
And I was mentioning earlier that Christian Hare wanted people to pronounce it hair. So when he wrote his will, it wound up being spelled H-A-R-E.
I'm sure.
Yeah, okay. So here's where we get, this is interesting. Okay, you've got up here Hans Hare and Elizabeth Kundig. I've got them twice so that you can see their sons Isaac and Christian are both there. And then you have Henry was over here and with John Whitmer. Then over here you've got Adam Hare. There's second generation Hare cousins, but we're not even to a first generation Lefevre yet. I mean cousins. So you have Philip and Paradise Tanner Dan. Did anybody go to the Philip Lefevre cemetery?
Yes.
There's a great big bronze plaque, and it mentions Paradise Tanner Dan. It mentions this whole thing, you know. So here we've got Martha Schenk and Chatham Tanner Dan, and then you've got David Lefevre, David W. Lefevre, and the W stands for Whitmar. So his mother was a Whitmar. So it gets real complicated. So that's why down here they're fifth generations. So then I explain here through Christian's daughter. I mean, it goes on and on and on, and you get the Lefevre ones. Okay, so from their son Adam through Philip Lefevre, this is not the gunsmith. This is another Philip Lefevre born in 1778. Then, who was the father of Chatham Tanner Dan, and the father of Ada Letitia Lefevre, you get John Allen Lefevre. So then, John Allen's parents, Daniel K. Lefevre and Ada Letitia Lefevre, are fifth cousins through their hairline. That really sounds funny, through their hairline. I have to remember that. But they're second cousins on their Lefevre line. So you go through, you walk through this again. Through Christian's daughter, Maria Katharina again. You go to Philip. I mean, you go, well, I lost myself here. But anyway, you go to Adam Lefevre, then to Paradise Tanner Dan. Then you go to David W. Lefevre and Daniel Koch Lefevre. Now here's some new blood. Jacob Koch comes from Germany in the mid-1800s. He has a daughter named Catherine, so they're not related. But if you look back at this, all the ones with asterisks are part of that Swiss Mennonite groups. And those asterisks mean I have that research in progress, or I have more information than I can put on this chart. So when you get down to here, we have, this is kind of funny. So the family names repeat in diverse patterns, yet they are close cousin relationships throughout the tree. 3 of my lines come from 2 of Hans Hare's sons, Reverend Christian and Isaac. And then we have, somehow I'm making this good. So the last cousin relationship that I have to tell you is through Hans Hare, through his son Isaac Hare, because I've concentrated on Christian. So you have Henry Hare, then you have Esther Hare. And by the way, this was hard to find, this particular one. It was hard to find, and I got a lead from somebody who had said, you have more hair. More hairs in your line. I was glad to know it. I always like to have a lot of hair. But you have more hairs there. So then it goes down to this Philip Lefevre. It goes to, she's married to a Goshener, and the Gosheners even go back to the pioneer ancestors. It's a bit insane. I've been doing genealogy for 50 years and I've never seen anything like this. So, I mean, I understood that close marriages weren't a big problem among the Mennonites, but it's kind of a little strange even to me. So then you have all of this, and you get down to here and come down here. So I'm going to say this particular cousin relationship is daunting. Martha Schenk and her husband, Chatham Tanner Dan. And he was called Chatham as opposed to Paradise Tanner Dan because he was from Chatham, which is in Chester County. And he moved back there to London Grove later in his life and retired. And then his daughter, Letitia, married a Quaker widower. So they got out of the immediate vicinity. But, and also, I didn't tell you, but Daniel K. Lefevre died when he was only 27 years old, and we don't know how. And we don't even know if they were actually legally married, because there was no requirements to record marriages, deaths, anything. So when I went to the Lancaster Historical Society, it's actually lancasterhistory.org now, the man told me flat out, you need to get this from the church. And I knew just where they were buried, and I went and got pictures of their graves yesterday, and I'll do that in writing. But, okay, so you've got Martha Schenck here, and her husband are fourth cousins on their hair lineage, and their, at least I didn't say hairline, the hair lineage, and their daughter, Ada Letitia, is therefore fourth cousin once removed to each of her parents. And the weird, what's more is that Martha Schenck is also fourth cousin to Paradise Tanner Dan up here. And then, therefore, she's fourth cousin once removed to Daniel Koch Lefevre, who is her son-in-law. You see what I mean? So I thought you would be a little amused by this, but I hope at least that you have enjoyed this excursion into my heritage. It made charting the folks quite challenging. If you're interested, I welcome a visit. Yeah?
I'm curious about what the asterisks are tying to.
The asterisk means that these people are part of the Swiss Mennonite pioneer group, and that I've got the research in process, and it's moving up the line. Also, I did not have enough room up here. This took a long time to make, but it's actually not a very nice chart. It's not. I do have a pretty fan chart that's on my computer, and I'll reduce this presentation, and I'll leave it somewhere so that you can look at it. It's a nice fan chart, starting with that John Allen Lefevre. Anyway, if you're interested, I welcome you to visit my charts, and also to my Ancestry.com public page, and it's called Peregrine's Progeny. Yes?
Oh, I just had a question. The K-O-C-H, you pronounce that Koch?
Koch.
I had always seen that and knew people that pronounced it Koch.
Well, I know, and in German, I looked it up, and it's pronounced Koch, and it's a lot of people like the Koch brothers that stole so many millions of dollars. It is German. It means cook, and that was a recent immigrant. And you will never believe what Jakob Koch did for a living. He was a moneylender. And when he died, he didn't have a will. What he had was an inventory that included debts owed to him and cash on hand and investments. He invested in bonds and all kinds of things. So that's kind of interesting. The only ones I have that seem to be very recent, or I don't know anything about, is Elizabeth Clack. But I'll tell you what, the Lefevres here have probably seen that Pennsylvania Lefevre's book. I remember when I looked at it and looked up my ancestors, I kept saying, well, they came right here and married a bunch of Germans. Years ago when I got that book, I didn't really realize about the Swiss Mennonites. And yes, they speak a form of German, but they are Swiss Mennonites. They are very strict, and they have, their lifestyle was really fascinating. I have to tell you about a little aha experience that I had that I've only had a few times in genealogy. And I was there at the Hare House with my niece, and I was in the kitchen, and it's really interesting. There's this massive, fireplace. They made it so that the fire was there so that the lady of the house could cook at a higher level and not get down there into the fire. It was a really lovely house. And, Hans Hare and Martin Kendig, who I'm descended from also, and a few other people came, a little community came, and then they wanted to go back and get the Ferrays came in two waves. Okay, they sent Martin Kendig back to get the rest of them, and come back. The reason they sent Martin and not Christian Hare is because Christian Hare was acting as the minister of the community, and they didn't feel like they could do without him when he went back to Europe and then came back. So Martin went back and got them. So on the land grant plat, it looks like Martin Kendig owns 3 things, and I believe that what it is that he bought some in order to provide for those other people. But where was I? I was telling. Oh yeah, huh?
The aha moment.
Oh yes, the aha moment. So when they brought the old couple back, Hans Hare and his wife Elizabeth, they stayed in this little room that now has a bunch of tools and stuff, because later it became a storage room. But so I was standing there thinking, my 8th great grandparents slept right there, my 7th great grandparents slept in the master bedroom, and my 6th great grandmother, Maria Katharina, was upstairs with her siblings in the attic. That's where they lived. And it was a really nice big room with a place where they could burn a fire that was radiated heat through plaster and so forth. So it was really a nice moment. I felt very connected. It did not in any way change the way I feel about my Huguenot ancestors, but I did realize that it was quite a distinct community, and that Philip made the effort to fit into the Mennonite community and live amongst them as a respected individual, a talented individual, a gunsmith on top of it. And it seems like he was respected in both worlds. And then I ran across a wonderful article that somebody had written at the time. It was a journalistic article where somebody said, Philip and his wife, Mary, Philip Lefevre and his wife, Mary, were in town. And Mary is the daughter of Reverend Christian Hare. And so, you know, they were flexible. They could expand themselves into different groups of people, and I thought that was adaptable. Exactly. I thought that was really neat, and I liked knowing that. It made me feel very good. So I've been doing genealogy since Echo was a baby, an infant, and I feel like it's a wonderful thing. It's the 2nd most popular hobby in the United States. And by the way, this couple, Philip and Mary Catherine, it's Catherine and Isaac, are the originators of most of the Lefevres in the United States. It's a big deal. So thank you for your time. Anybody have any more questions? Would anybody like me to have that fan chart up so you can see it later? Okay. All right, well, thank you very much.